Scrumbrella, scaling agile projects. Over the last few years, we have seen an explosion of methods and frameworks for large projects. You may have heard the names or the acronyms, LESS, SAFE, Nexus, amongst just a few. It's important to understand that these are scaling frameworks and that they are there to help us facilitate big products and not enterprise frameworks to replace our traditional enterprise bureaucracies with a slightly more agile bureaucracy. So we'd only be using them when we have big projects. The selection of appropriate approaches for this problem space is one of your critical success factors. Choose poorly and you could be severely limiting your agility and your success. Now, from my experience over the years of organizations home growing and importing these methods in this world, I have discovered these key points. Any scaled method must be as simple as possible. The more overthinking and complexity in the model, the more opportunities there are to break it. Any scaled approach must be about inspecting and adapting the processes and method and approach itself, and not just the product under creation. We can call this a meta framework. And any scaled approach must clearly identify the difference between a good or even best practice and what is actually fundamental to the framework. Otherwise, we can end up with lots of cruft that is unessential and unnecessary and possibly bad practice afflicted on our own enterprise. And we need to ask, does the scaled approach help us transform our organization, or does it limit or hide or cover up the current organizational structure? Now, I could imagine using some sort of half-assed agile approach as a stepping stone to a more modern, appropriate method, but we do need to make it sure that we use it as a stepping stone and it doesn't become a ball and chain holding us back. I personally prefer my scaled approaches in a Scrumbrella style, using the Scrum framework at a higher level, using a scaled Scrum framework to act as both a support mechanism and a shielding device. Now, there are some good practices I have seen and implemented myself. I don't want to go into too much detail on them, but things such as shared visions across teams, some form of shared product backlog, the idea of a Scrum team of volunteers from the teams, so not a management Scrum, but a team from the teams, helping deal with impediments, scaling the Scrum Master and product owner positions appropriately, having a sprint backlog of work for this team of teams, aligning sprints, misaligning scrums, and even that scrum of scrums, it's been much misaligned, but I found it very useful for impediment removal, a sort of a management by exception model. And then having reviews and retros, both on a team-to-team basis, with some form of shared review and retrospective with representatives of each team. Finally, some form of support mechanism for the Scrum teams from a technology point of view. And I don't mean an architecture team or something like that, but perhaps some form of shaping Scrum, big brains, volunteers from each team coming together to discuss the system shape, the product shaped, and how that product shape is growing behind the scenes.